Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first mini lesson of the semester. Today, we're going to be looking at the purposes of government according to various ancient philosophers. Before we get started, I do want to review expectations in terms of taking notes for this class. On Google Classroom, under the Important Resources topic at the top of the page, you will see a Google Doc document which is posted, which provides you with a template for notes for the entire semester. It is highly recommended that you type your notes in this Doodle Dot so that they're all in one place. Your notes can be used on the Twit chats, which are the formative assessments at the end of each lesson, on projects, on mastery chats, on the written portion of them, which together with the verbal portion make up 50% of your grade, and various other assignments. In addition to being used on various other assignments, they are also individually graded out of 5 points. If you would prefer to handwrite them, that is totally fine. However, just know that anytime we take notes, you will need to upload a photo of those notes in order to earn credit, because I will not have access to your Google Doc. So the learning target for this lesson is I can describe, compare, and contrast political philosophers' views on the purposes of government. The first 3 lessons of the marking period, we are going to be focusing on looking at why governments exist and different types of government that are out there. Then we get into the specifics of the United States. In this mini lesson, you are going to see 5 different philosophers' views on government and hopefully be able to draw some conclusions about how these ideas about government connect to the government as we know it in the United States today. The first person that we're going to look at is Aristotle. Aristotle is often referred to as the father of political science. He was a Greek philosopher that lived long before the United States was even settled. However, many of his concepts are still influential in the government today. He believed that the governments are made to promote the common good. So the common good is meaning that it is meant to protect individuals and basically carry out society as a whole. And sometimes, in order for a government to do that, they have to take away certain individual rights of people, because it is creating rules and expectations for that society that are enforced in order to ensure everyone's safety. And he also believed that people are inherently social and that societies were natural to live in communities. So Aristotle made the connection between communities and families. He said, much like a family, a community needs some sort of leadership structure. And in order for that community to be effective, he believed that a government needed to exist. He also advocated for a balance between 2 different types of government, which we'll learn more about in the next mini lesson. He believed that the best type of government would be a balance between a democracy, which would be a government led by the people, and an oligarchy, which by definition is a government led by a few powerful people. He had his concerns with both of these types of government, however, advocated that a combination of the two could be very helpful to society. With democracy, he was concerned that it would lead to mob rule because it was giving people too much say in the government system. With an oligarchy, which would be run by just a couple people, he believed that if it was a full-on oligarchy, that it could lead to corruption and oppression because there were so many people having to follow just those couple of very powerful people in charge. He also emphasized the rule of law and believed that laws needed to be fair, impartial, and apply to all people. He also believed that a government helps to develop moral citizens, including virtues, courage, justice, and moderation. So he believed that these are things that, based off of how a government is run, it could educate their society and better all people living there. While Aristotle is often considered the father of political science, John Locke is hugely influential within the United States government specifically. He was an English philosopher. One of his big things was this idea of natural rights. So he was the first to develop this concept of natural rights, which he defined as life, liberty, and property. He believed that people were born free and equal, and that no government system should be able to take those 3 rights away from anyone: the right to life, the right to liberty, and the right to property. Now, if you're looking at that list and it sounds somewhat familiar, it may be because two of those things are included in the Declaration of Independence. When Thomas Jefferson and the rest of the committee went to form the Declaration of Independence, they reflected on this concept of natural rights. However, instead of defining it as property, Jefferson defined it as the pursuit of happiness. So he didn't necessarily believe that all people should have the right to property, but he believed that people should have the right to be able to establish a life where they could own property. Locke also advocated for a limited government, which we largely see in the United States as defined by the Constitution. He advocated for a separation of power between different government officials and to ensure that no one became too powerful, and to develop a system of checks and balances to ensure that everyone was carrying out their responsibilities effectively. He also advocated that if a government doesn't protect natural rights or overstep, then a government can be overthrown. So, in other words, he was saying that people within a society, if they're looking at that government as a whole and they don't feel that their natural rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness or property are being protected, or that that government is becoming too powerful, then they felt that they should be able to overthrow and rebel against that government. This was a huge justification within the Declaration of Independence when Thomas Jefferson was basically justifying why it was important for them to create the Declaration of Independence to indicate why they were separating from Great Britain. He also believed in popular sovereignty, which was revolutionary at the time. Popular sovereignty is talking about people having a say in the government, so he was one of the first philosophers to advocate it to the extent that he did. The next one we're going to look at is Thomas Hobbes. Thomas Hobbes was an English philosopher. He believed that the purpose of government was to maintain order within the society to avoid chaos, and he believed that people were inherently power hungry, so that some form of government was necessary to avoid this chaos. He believed that by creating a government, people are entering into a social contract, and that social contract states that the government is going to protect people and provide security for the society as a whole at the exchange of certain freedoms. So there's certain things that people aren't allowed to do in order to protect the security of all. He also believed that the government was created to protect natural rights, including life, liberty, and property, similar to Locke. He also advocated that the government needed absolute power to prevent chaos. So, unlike a lot of the other philosophers who had democratic ideas about government and people having a representation and a say on how things were run, he believed that that government should have central power and that they should have all the power. So, he believed that people inherently were meant to pursue self interest and that could get them in trouble. So consequently, there was someone needing to be in absolute charge to make sure that people weren't pursuing those self-interests in a way that could harm others. He also believed that in order for a government to be as successful as possible, they had to have a strong source to enforce the rules. In other words, he was getting at the concept of if there is a law and no one's enforcing it, then that law doesn't really matter. So he was talking about how a government, in order for it to be effective, needs to have some sort of system to strongly enforce those rules in order to make sure that people are following the expectations of the society. He also believed that this should be a central authority, so there shouldn't be like a separation between state governments and the federal government or anything like that. Montaigne was a French philosopher. He advocated for a separation of power, which largely inspired the separation of power as spelled out in the United States Constitution today. He believed that the power should be separated between the legislative, executive, and judicial branch. Within the United States, this is defined as the legislative branch representing the House of Representatives and the Senate, which make up the Congress. The executive branch includes the president, the vice president, and the president's cabinet. The judicial judicial branch is made up of the Supreme Court and other federal courts and other government systems that may look a little bit different. He also strongly advocated for a system of checks and balances, which also was strongly advocated by the founding fathers when creating the Constitution and creating an institution where the different branches have different checks to ensure no one becomes too powerful. He also believed that a government needs to adapt to different circumstances, which was quite revolutionary at the time and is something that is still debated to this day within the United States, whether the Constitution should be enforced as is or whether a government needs to be adaptable as things in society changes. Our final philosopher is Rousseau. Rousseau was a Genevan philosopher. He advocated for protecting the common good, so we see a little bit of overlap there with Aristotle. And he also strongly advocated for popular sovereignty, where the people have the power. He believed that a government should be the reflection of the general will of the population. Please make sure once you complete your notes that you are either uploading a picture if you took them on paper, uploading a document if you created your own Google Doc or other digital file, or that you are clicking turn in on the one that's already posted. So then I can put in your 5 points and then I'll return it to you. So then we don't have issues with you not having access to the document the next time we go to do notes.